Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for Transcendent Self 2, which really is called, we call it the Anahata Nad, the unstruck sound. The Anahata Nad, Anahata is unstruck, and the Nad or Nada, it can be just pronounced two ways, depending on which part of India you're from, I guess. Nad, N-A-D, or Nada means sound. Nada Brahma, they say, which means God is sound. It's been pronounced like the world is sound, but it's more like, God is sound. Nada Brahma. We say in the West here, or really the West is not really correct to say in the Bible. I mean, we're more familiar with the words so that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And so that's been interpreted by many people, including John Roger, as the Word being the sound. In the beginning was the sound. So this sound is what we're dealing with here today in what we call the unstruck sound, the Anahata Nad, or the inner sound, or we could call it the sound current of God. And what we're doing today is a very specific process. The Transcendent Self 1, the spiritual sky, we do meditation on breath, on sensation, on what's currently called like mindfulness, or just being present, or heartfulness. Those kind of practices of entering into spaciousness. And the Transcendent Self 3, the celestial melodies, we work with sound in terms of pure sound, like from musical instruments, Tibetan bowls and other crystal bowls and things like that, stringed instruments, things that create a vibration and a sound, and that goes through us, and it's basically a sound bath. The Transcendent Self 2, the one we're here today, the Anahata Nad, the inner sound, is about a very specific practice called spiritual exercises. It's not meditation. It's not, we're not going into our bodies at all. In fact, just the reverse. We're pulling the energy from our bodies into the point in the center of our head, has been called the third eye or the Tisratil. It's around where the pineal gland resides, right in the center of our head. And we bring our energy there, and from there, we actually go out of our physical bodies in our spiritual bodies, in our soul bodies, and travel the realms of consciousness. So it's quite an exciting journey. We can travel the inner realms, which is our own level of consciousness, which is kind of quite deep and full, and then the outer realms, which is quite deep as well. So it just depends on what is for your highest good. So that's why we always begin by just asking exactly that, what is for the highest good, or asking for the highest and purest light from the highest and purest source to surround and fill each one of us and the space that we're in for the highest good. Marvelous to see all of you on the screen, and really nice. Thank you for joining today. So we want to put ourselves in that energy field, and since we're going on what could be called a journey, there's a wonderful quote here that I love to quote this from John Roger from the book Walking with the Lord. This is a book that I actually was responsible for compiling John Roger's sayings, for want of a better word, or excerpts from John Roger on spiritual exercises. Definitely not the final word, just basically scratches the surface, but it does give a good introduction to the practice. But he said, this is a path of great noise and great silence, a path of great serenity and great trouble, a path of total fulfillment and complete emptiness. How can it be these things? That is where God resides in all of this. So it's like, wow, So there's a lot going on. So when we go inside, we've got great silence, we've got great trouble, great fulfillment, emptiness. What else? Noise. The whole Megillah here. That when we go inside, we're dealing with all of this. How do we get through it all? And fortunately, we have a guide, and that guide resides within each human being on the planet. It's almost like we're put on the planet, we're thrown out here. It's just like we enter the world screaming, yeah, what was I thinking? And here we are. And it's almost like we've been given this thread where we're cut from the umbilical cord of our mothers. But we almost have this direct line, this umbilical cord, back into spirit or God or love or whatever you want to call it. And that thread and that direct line is called the mystical traveler consciousness, and it resides within each one of us, and it's ready to be called forward or awakened at any time. For most people, they're not aware of it, and so once you become aware of it, that's available to you. And so we just ask for the consciousness of the mystical traveler to come forward from within each of our hearts and guide us on our inner journey into who we are and beyond. So we want to take this into who we are. And who are we? Well, we're spirit. We're spirit. So let's hear from John Roger, just a very brief excerpt here from him on what are we made of? And here's John Roger.
I just want to ask you, what's the answer?
No, I have an answer.
You do?
Yeah. I was trying to find out how to put it down in a few words. When God created you by sending you forth as a it's like a hypostasis, an extension of God back into the world. He didn't use junk or crud, nor anything less than the very best. But what he did is he gave you your mind from the mental realm, or the call power, and says, through your loving and your heart wisdoms, you'll overcome the negativity of the mind and the doubts that it has inherent within having a mind. Keep coming back to the heart and the soul, to your divine nature, and all these questions become nothing. They just become answers of how to follow through with what you've set up inside of you. And that takes care of the worry, the concern, the worthless feelings, the negative points of view, the public opinion point of view. You'll just not deal in that anymore because you'll be dealing with the divinity.
So that's where we're going with all of this, into a place where we don't really care about anything other than this divinity, the place where all the answers are present, place where there's no worries or concerns, that we know that we are one. So the practice is called spiritual exercises, and again, we do that by going inside and actually chanting a mantra. Now, in the movement of spiritual inner awareness, there's actually a process of initiation into the sound current, and people are given individual tones as they traverse the realms of consciousness. But for the general public, and also when we're in public, those tones, those names are sacred, and so they're kept within each person. But for the general public, we chant something called the hue, Sanskrit word for God, and an ancient name, and a name that helps us traverse all levels of consciousness. So it's a tone that incorporates everything, and so that's why we use it. Spelled H-U, and we can chant it hue. Or we can break it down into its letters and chant H, U, Now, I was reading a quote that I felt was very, very relevant to all of this. And it was in the last segment that I did. Let me see if I can find it. Here we are. It was from a piece called Sound and Silence by Robert Gray. And he said, you can approach your movement as a creative act, bringing it to life with your breath and your intent, just as a musician brings music to life. A musician sits in a silence that holds only the intent to play before she brings the music up out of that silence with her breath and body. The sounds of the music unfold through time until at some point the musician lets the silence return. Only now the silence is different, deeper. It holds more. So as we chant the Hue together, I'm going to do a kind of a round where we're going to breathe in and out 5 times and then do the HU 5 times. And we'll do that in 3 rounds, and then we'll go into spiritual exercises. And then at the bottom of the hour, we'll bring some choral music in, and you can continue to be traveling inwardly. And then I may have a few words to say, and we'll continue with this process. But this idea that after we chant, the silence becomes even deeper and holds more is really my experience with all of this. So see what you can do the best you can, close your eyes. And the only wrong way to do spiritual exercises is not to do it. So we'll just begin. Again, we ask for the light, for the mystical traveler consciousness. And we saw John Rogers, so I always love to ask for John Rogers' energy and presence to infuse everything we're doing here. So let's start by just breathing in and out. Just easy. In and out. In, out. In, out. In, out. And now let's chant 5 HUs. Listen to the silence. And in that silence, just bring your attention to the center of your head. You can chant the H, U, or the Hu inwardly. We'll do it just one more. H, U. You may see a color. Just allow your attention to remain in the center of your head. And also listen. Listen for the sound, the inner sound, the sound that emanates from the heart of God. And connect with that sound and ride it back inside of you, into who you truly are and beyond. We'll do this in silence for 15 minutes, and then you'll hear some choral music at the bottom of the hour, and you can continue through that. The music is just there to perhaps inspire you or allow you to go deeper. Here's another quote from John Roger from the Walking with the Lord book. If you want to leave this planet, and if you want to truly see God, you must see God in the spirit, not in the flesh, because it's not done in the flesh. Only by reflection do we see things in the flesh, and only by spirit do we see things directly. And every time we see anything through the flesh, we are heirs to the errors of the flesh. But if we can, during spiritual exercises, hold with the presence of the divine, we would realize that it is the flesh that shakes, the mind that shakes, the emotions that shake, and the unconscious that shakes. The part that is pure and steady and knows, that's the part that I work with. That's you. So during these spiritual exercises, again, we're coming to the part that is pure and steady and knows. It doesn't shake. So just be in that place. And it can sometimes help to have the quality of devotion, love. Not something that is separate from you, but that you awaken the love that you are, that we are. We can just prime that by thinking of someone we love more than anything. Could be a historical figure, someone close to us in our family, children, spouses, parents, grandparents. It could be a kitten or a puppy. Doesn't matter what it is, because we're just using that as a way to prime the pump, to lead us into our own loving and devotion. In the Jewish religion, the highest and holiest day is Yom Kippur, the day of fasting. This is a day of letting go. The Jewish holidays begin on the evenings when the sun goes down. And the evening of Yom Kippur is called Kol Nidre, and a very, very sacred time as people prepare themselves for the fast. And it has a very big devotional element to it as people are letting go into spirit. In the movement of spiritual inner awareness, perhaps we would do a similar thing, but through forgiveness. Just forgiving ourselves for any judgments that we've held. I forgive myself for judging myself, someone, an event. I can just say that person and perhaps what I perceive that they did. But it's all with the idea of letting go. And so Yom Kippur is a time of letting go. Letting go of the past. And so as you sit in silence, perhaps you can have that devotional nature, in that loving towards God or Spirit or whatever you say. In the meantime, if you find your mind wandering, just go back to the HU or the HU. Enter the center of your head. Perhaps you see a color. And just move into that. And travel. Perhaps first on the silence, and then on the sound current. You can begin to slowly return to the room. And by that I mean just come back into your body. Gently wiggle your fingers and your toes. And just really appreciate the stillness and the silence that you're in. We began by talking about the steadiness and the knowing that we are entering into. And hopefully you can take that with you throughout the rest of your week. So a lot of times with SEs, we're actually preparing the place for later on, perhaps when we go to sleep at night. We've, as John Roger would say, we've filled the gas tank. And so we can travel further when we put the body down completely and we're off. And so perhaps that's the time when you'll have the great spiritual experience, which you may or may not be aware of. So yeah, just the fact that we put ourselves in the position, we're available to God, to Spirit, we're communing with this divine presence and putting ourselves in that presence is a marvelous thing to do. So I thank you all for joining us and being part of this. I want to thank Stella, our lovely hostess, and Paul Wilcox, who was here by himself on sound. Beautiful job. And also, of course, Maria Jose Marignon, who does an amazing job of translating. And of course, all of us were actually quite awake. We had our coffee and coffee talk an hour beforehand. So perhaps without the coffee, I would have joined you in the realms of consciousness. But I was here, but having a wonderful, peaceful time in this energy field. So thank you all very much for being with us. And we'll see you hopefully the same time next week, and perhaps on Monday as well. Please let your friends know. Wonderful to see Jay Winston. Jay, lovely to see you. What a pleasure. Thank you again, Rosa. What a joy to see you. And also Gabby. Gabby's giving a wave. Thank you, Gabby. And we'll see you all next time.